Hello my lovelies and welcome back to my channel. Today we will be discussing a heavy true crime case based on The Keepers, a docu-series on Netflix. It is about the disappearance and murder of Catherine Cesnick. This case has been cold for 45 plus years. So let's grab that cup of tea and let's just jump right into it. So who was Catherine Cesnick? Who was she? She was born on the 17th of November of 1942. And from her early years, she was always so passionate about learning, about life. She was such a bright student that she became valedictorian and student body president of her year. Later on, she became a nun and she was teaching at the Archbishop Keogh all-girls private school, bear with me please, in Baltimore. And this is at the time of her disappearance. She was teaching there. There she taught drama and English. And she was beloved by all her students. She was adored. She was very young and approachable and relatable and kind and thoughtful. And she was just the type of person that people would look up to. They would look forward to going to her class because of how fun it was. She was so ahead of her time, you guys, that she was teaching the Scarlet Letter. And we have to remember that nuns were supposed to be scary. Nuns were supposed to be someone that you would be afraid of. I mean, people at that time were getting caned. I mean, you know, they used to get caned by the nuns. They were very strict, very scary people. So to have someone so lovely and teach them about the Scarlet Letter, she was the teacher that all of us would dream to have, right? People, even her students, would question, why would someone so beautiful, so kind, with so much ahead of her, why would she choose to join the church? So in the docu-series it shows, and I did some background research on this, and at the time the Catholic Church was going through some major changes. And at that time they changed the garments of what the nuns were wearing at the time. That was huge. The garments more approachable, and what they were doing is they were encouraging people, young people, to join the protests, to become part of a greater change. They wanted to show that there was the path to making a difference in the world. So a lot of young people were inspired by that because they were like, okay, I can make a difference if I join the church. I can go and make a difference. Probably one of the reasons that Catherine decided to join the church, because she was so passionate about life and she was so giving and kind that she wanted to make a difference. That just shows us the type of character and the type of person she was. So what happened to Cathy? Who would want to harm such a wonderful person? She disappeared on November 7th of 1969 and her body was found 2 months later, you guys, in 1970, in January. So let's go and take a look through the timeline, and then you guys can comment below what you guys think about it. At 11:30 a.m., it was a typical day for Cathy. She went to school, she was teaching, and she was particularly excited that day. You guys, she was so happy that day because she was going to go and buy an engagement present. And she was talking to a girl after class and she was telling her this. And then later in the docuseries, they say that it was for her sister, that she was super happy for her sister and she couldn't wait to buy her something nice. So let's fast forward a couple of hours to 2:30 p.m. Cathy finished work and she went home. to an apartment where she lived. And yes, this is a bit odd, but what happened is that Cathy was given an exception. She was allowed to live outside the convent and live in an apartment, and this is because she appealed to work to be able to become a better teacher. She told the church that she basically needed to understand what day-to-day life was for her students. So she was allowed to live in an apartment with her friend, Sister Russell, who was the math teacher at Keogh. So the relationship there, basically, they were friends, you know, they've lived together, they laughed, they joked together, and it has been said that basically Cathy was the creative and kind and approachable person, and she was the light of the room, whilst Russell was the more cold and analytical person. And now let's move to 7 p.m. So at 7 p.m. it was very normal for Cathy to go shopping, and remember that she was super excited about buying this engagement present for her sister. And it's been stated that it is basically a typical routine for her. They would go to the very popular village shopping center at Edmondson Square, and so she went there, and before going shopping she went to the bank. She went by herself. Sister Russell did not go with her, and she, as we know. And then fast forward a little bit, and then she goes and she returns to her car. And this is where it stops. That was the last time that Catherine Cesnick was seen alive. And she just vanished. She disappeared from existence. Nobody knew where she could have gone, what could have happened to her. It was a shock to the system because nobody saw her after this. It's like she vanished out of thin air. There was no proof that Catherine made it home that night. Now let's fast forward to 11 p.m. Sister Russell becomes concerned because her friend hasn't returned home, and for some reason she doesn't call the police at this stage. She decides instead to call Father Coop. And Father Coop was, as we have been told, and in the docu-series it shows his statement, that he was very close with Sister Cathy. They had a special bond and a special friendship, and they were just best friends. Maybe that's why Sister Russell decided to call Coop instead of the police at that point. But she calls him and she's like, hey, have you seen Cathy, or is Cathy with you? And at the time, Father Coop was at the movies, at the theater, with his friend, Father Peter. And he was like, no, I haven't seen Cathy. And they decide to go to the apartment. I am not sure what they were doing. Honestly, I don't know, because they called the police at 1 a.m. 1 a.m. When they finally called the police and the police arrived at the scene, they took statements from everybody. And another thing that's concerning and another red flag for me is that Sister Russell was reluctant to talk. At 3:30 a.m., Peter and Coop decide to leave the apartment and start making their way home. On their way home, they find Sister Cathy's car, which is a very, very important and odd part of the case. They find her car parked in a very strange way in a corner of the street, not far away from where the apartment was. And the car was dirty, you guys. Like, it was disgusting. It was described as if someone drove that car through a swamp. Yes. And basically, someone would have had to go out of their way to put that car there. It just randomly just wasn't. It was definitely parked that way for a reason. And to make this case crazier, a girl similar age to Cathy went missing 4 days afterwards. In a similar situation. The girl went shopping and she disappeared, and later on they found her body. So the police at this stage are concerned because they start to feel as if someone out there is targeting beautiful young women that go shopping alone and attack them. Joyce Malecki's family is still trying to find answers and trying to get justice for her as well. After Cathy's disappearance, the police launched a huge search for her. They enlisted around 26 police officers and dogs, and as we know, dogs are very good at picking up scents, and unfortunately they were not able to find her scent anywhere. And this is one of the biggest issues, because obviously someone must have been keeping her somewhere at that time, or something odd must have been happening there. Cathy's body was later found, like I said, 2 months later in January 1970, and it was found by a hunter and his son. And the body was in a remote landfill area. It was very remote, and the police and everybody notices that someone really had to go out of their way to put her body there, because it is so remote. And then when you think about it, okay, so the car was parked in a really odd way, they couldn't find her scent, and then her body was in this crazy remote area. So that's instantly, okay, so something else is at play here. It wasn't just like a random crime or something like that. So like I said, this case has been called for 45 years, and her students have been dedicated to trying to find justice for Sister Catherine. Gemma Hopkins and Abby Fitzgerald are two amazing women who want the truth to come out. You know, Sister Cathy deserves that, and they're extremely passionate about it, and they were heavily involved in the docu-series. However, the docu-series does not give us a definite conclusion. It doesn't show us, but what it does give us, it's a clear insight of what could have happened to Cathy and who was likely responsible for her disappearance and murder. Throughout the docu-series, we see the many allegations made against Joseph Maskell, the chaplain of Keogh, and Neil Magnus, a father in that church, in that school. These two people were abusing sexually these girls of the private school. They were the monsters in that hell. Jean Winner, aka Jane Doe, was one of the women that felt a deep love for Sister Cathy. She was going through a lot of things in 1992 because her repressed memories started coming up to the surface, and it is shown in the docu-series just how painful it was for her. She was given a lawyer and directed to a higher priest within the church to try and resolve the situation. And these guys come back to her and say, actually, to be able to corroborate, to be able to take him out and corroborate your story, we need someone else's opinion, another girl that's been through this, to come forward and tell us. And at that time, Jean was like, I'm not gonna put someone else in that situation. Someone else. I don't want to do that. I'm going through hell myself. Why would I put someone else through that? And eventually the lawyer got fired. They fired him. Her husband was like, no, this is not good enough. You guys not even trying to believe my wife. It's enough. So Jean got another lawyer, her own private lawyer. And they managed to get responses from so many women that they were making allegations about Joseph Maskell. One of them was Teresa Lancaster, and she was also speaking about a gynecologist who was basically prescribing drugs so that Maskell could drug the girls. I mean, this guy was a complete complete monster, and he managed to weasel himself into Teresa's family life, and took advantage of her father's Catholic nature, that he believed that Mescal was doing the best thing for his daughter, to save his daughter. And unfortunately, she wasn't saved. She was taken down a horrific rabbit hole. So in 1994, Teresa and Jean decided to file lawsuits against the gynecologist and Mescal. Unfortunately, these were dismissed by the court because of statute of limitations. They basically said that repressed memories are not enough evidence to convict a person. So what was Mescal doing all of these things? So it turns out that the Catholic Church decided to protect his ass and decided to take him to a wellness center on temporary leave. The person who was working it there at one point said that they used to get so many referrals from different priests under different descriptions. So that they either had depression, or that they were treating the students badly, or that they were doing all of these things, that they needed mental health support. And when Mescal got there, it turns out it was something else. It turns out that they were actually abusing children. And Mescal's like, no, I don't have depression. I just slept with one of my students, just casually. And it got to the point that they were so fed up with the priests, with the Catholic Church sending the degenerate and pedophile priests, that they were like, no, unless you tell us what these patients are coming for, we're not going to accept them anymore. And what happened? You guys guess what happened? It turns out that was the last patient they sent, and they never, ever, ever sent another priest again to their wellness center. So, after all of these allegations, he actually had a box filled of evidence, filled with records. I mean, like tons and tons of records, because this psychopath had a bunch of all of the records. He didn't want to get rid of them. So he didn't want to destroy them. So what did he do? He went and buried them in a graveyard. There's an informant who is incredibly worried for his safety and his family's safety. And he was there when the police were digging up for this evidence. And he said that there was so much evidence there to convict Mescal and put him in prison for a long time, right? They had enough evidence to do that. But for some reason, the chair of the department, they said that it wasn't enough. There were photographs in there. And this informant is just shocked. And the thing is that this shows the corruption that was happening, because Mescal wasn't just the chaplain at the school. He was the chaplain for the police department. He was the psychologist there. And to make things even better, he was protected because his brother was a police officer of high ranking. So there you go. In some of her allegations, Jean also talks about the fact that to scare her, Mescal took her to the location of Cathy's body when she was younger, and said that she was wiping the maggots off her face, and she was saying, help me, help me, help me. And he was like, this is what happens when people talk badly about other people. So he obviously despised Jean, and she was terrified. So when people come and say, oh, why didn't you come sooner? It's because, first of all, she had repressed those memories, because the brain does that when you're in survival mode. It completely blocks everything so that you can survive. And secondly, she was terrified of this monster. Joseph was then later sent to Ireland on temporary leave from the church. He was sent away, and he wasn't supposed to be performing any duties in Ireland, But what did this crazy asshole do? Sorry. What does this person do? He goes ahead and he does that anyway. He goes and he does and abuses people over there as well. And there is a whole case of him abusing people in Ireland as well. And of course, Joseph Maskell basically denied anything. All the allegations made against him, he denied it. And, till his death. He denied it till his death. He died of a stroke in 2001. And even though the lawsuits that were done against Joseph Maskell and the gynecologist were dropped due to that statute of limitations, the Archdiocese settled with 16 victims, $472,000, even though they were not, the lawsuits were dropped, even though they were still denying these claims. And it's probably because they wanted to keep it covered and they wanted people to stop talking about it. So what are your afterthoughts on this? My afterthoughts are, after watching the documentary and doing the research, I strongly believe that Joseph Maskell had something to do with Cathy's murder, because Cathy was very intuitive and she was aware of what was happening in the school. One of the reasons that Jean said that she felt uncomfortable and that she felt guilty about Cathy's murder is because she confided in Cathy, and she, Cathy asked her, is someone making you do something you don't want to do? And she said yes. She nodded yes. And Cathy went and spoke to another student who was going through something like that and said, is someone making you do something that you don't want to do? And that other student said yes. And she told both girls, don't worry, it's going to stop. This is going to stop. This cannot continue anymore. I think she tried to put a stop to it. And I think that she paid the price. I think that Maskell had something to do with this. I believe every single victim, and I believe that they deserve justice. And this is what makes me so mad with the Catholic Church and organized religion, for example, in this case, and they just dismissed everything. How could you preach love and kindness when you're doing this? And I hope one day we actually see justice for Cathy. So I would love to hear your comments below. I recommend that you guys do watch the docuseries. It is extremely interesting, even though it's painful to watch. It has a lot more information about this case. I will link the Facebook page below, Justice for Cathy. And with that, my lovelies, I will let you go. If you do like the video and if you want to join my online family, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.